Okay, so this week what we're going to be doing is working with databases. Now, when we set up our PHP server, this is our web server, that first day what we also did was set up MySQL, which is a database engine that's used to help us connect to databases and holds the data and all of that. And that's on our web server here. So what I want to do is I want to log into the web server and I want to create a default database for us to use throughout the semester. So I'm just going to sign in with password. Okay, so at my terminal, what I want to do is I want to log into MySQL. In order to do that, I'm just going to type in MySQL, and it needs two different arguments. One is the username, so it's a -u, it's a lowercase u, and the username is root. And root has like full permission, so this is like the admin. And then I'm going to do a -p for password, but I don't type my password into the command line. I hit enter. And then I'm going to enter in my password here, which is just password. I hit enter. Access is denied. I'm going to hit my up arrow. I'm going to try that again. Access is denied. So one thing to notice here is it says root at localhost. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try to see if I use dev 123. Okay, so it was dev 123. That's what we did week 1. So MySQL has permissions that we're going to need to set. There's multiple ways that you can interact with MySQL. If we wrote PHP and the PHP was running on the web server, all of that would be localhost. So localhost is the current machine because our web server and our database server are running on the same machine. So security-wise, all of that's good. But if we want to connect to MySQL from a different machine, then we're going to have to actually have a different user than localhost. And actually, we should always run with a different user than the root user. But we'll work on that in a little bit. The first thing I want to do is just create a database. So I can do all my SQL from the command line now that I'm logged in and I have the prompt that starts MySQL greater than. So I'm just going to type in create database and I'm just going to call my database PHP class. And PHP class is one word, so my database is just a single word. So it's just create database PHP class, and then it ends with a semicolon. Okay, so we now have our database created. So now what we want to do is we want to create a user that can connect up to this database. Because like I said before, we don't want to use root for that. Root has a lot of permissions. It can get into any database. What we do is we want to create a user that can only connect up to this database. So if our system ever does get compromised or PHP somehow managed to get, downloaded, or somebody gets access to our, our GitHub account and they can get access to the database, we only want them to have access to this database and not all of the databases. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to grant all permissions on this specific database. So grant all privileges on PHP class. And then I'm going to do a .star, which means all of the tables in this database. So any asset, anything that's inside this database, we're going to create a user that can do anything to anything in this database. So I'm going to say to, and then I'm going to make up a user. I'm just going to call it db user. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a single tick, and then I'm going to use a single tick. So that's going to be db user, and then I'm going to use an @ sign, and then I'm going to do a single tick, and then I'm going to do a wildcard here, which is my %, and then a single tick. So what we're doing is we're saying that this user can do anything they want inside this database, but they can't in any other database. Because maybe we have a database that's dealing with credit card processing, confidential information. We don't want this user to be able to get into anything other than this. And instead of saying they have to physically log on to the machine to do it, we're going to give them the ability to do it from any IP address at all. I could give it a static IP address, and then only that user could log in from that IP address. But we really want it to work localhost, and we want to work from like our workstation. So big picture, I don't know if this is the most secure. Actually, I know it's not the most secure. It's the most flexible for learning. In the real world, you probably would want to restrict that to either one development machine, or you'd want to do your development on the server itself through something like phpMyAdmin or some other tool that you can access through the web server. Okay, but we need to identify it by a password. So I'm going to go identify. Identified by, and then I need to actually create my password. So I'm going to go with db dev 123. Then I'm going to use a single tick and then a semicolon. I'm going to hit enter. Okay, so now we created a user that can connect up to the database. So we're almost done here. We've got a database, we've got a username, we've got a password. That username and that password is tied to that database. But we need to modify the MySQL config file. And again, by default, it's really tight. They're only allowing access from the machine itself. Because we want to connect to this machine from our workstation. At that point, what we're going to want to do is just open that up. So I'm going to do a sudo, because we're going to need to open a file in a private area. I'm going to go gedit, and then it's going to be in my etc, and then it's going to be my SQL. And then, oh, wait a second, I'm still in MySQL. I can't run commands. I need to get out, so I'm going to type an exit. Okay, it said bye. Now I'm out. Okay, so now I can do sudo. And I'm going to do gedit. I'm going to go etc MySQL. And then it's going to be my config. Okay, so sudo gedit, and then I'm pathing to my config file. And then I'm going to hit enter. Password's password, because now we're the password of the administrator. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to scroll down. Right here, there's a bind address. So right now it's binding to the local host, 127.0.0.1. We could specify an IP address again in there, but because we're using dynamic IP addresses, they're going to change all the time. I'm just going to comment that out, so now it won't bind to one specific IP address, which means that we'll be able to connect to it from anywhere. So save that, and then I'm going to close that down. So now the server itself had a safeguard, and we're now changing the safeguard on the server itself, allowing incoming connections from anywhere, and our user has a safeguard, which we're now allowing connections from anywhere. Okay, so I want to restart the service. Sudo service, and then it's MySQL, and then I want to do a restart. I'm going to hit enter. So it's going to stop the service, it's going to restart the service, and then it'll pull in our updated config file. So at this point, we should be all good, and we should be able to connect up from our workstation. So let's give that a try now. So I'm just going to come over here, and then I have the same IP address. So I need to remember that 10.4.132.57. I've been very fortunate because that has not changed on me at all yet this semester. So I'm just going to close this down. I'm going to go over to my web server. I'm just going to launch that. Okay, so we left off with projects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double tap that shift key. So if I do shift and type in database, hit enter. So I've got my databases over here on the right hand side. So what I want to do is I'm going to click on the plus, and I'm going to go to my data sources, and over here I'll have MySQL. So I'm going to select the MySQL option, and over here I got a warning saying it's missing my database drivers, so I'm going to download those database drivers. And now what I want to do is, instead of having this connecting up to my local host, I'm going to do that 10.4.132.57. My database name is called PHP class. And my username is going to be dbuser. And then the password is going to be dbdev123, db for database, dbdev123. Okay, I wanted to remember that. I'm going to test my connection, and I'm going to allow access through the firewall. I'm going to allow access, and it was a successful test, so I'm going to apply that. Okay, so it wants password. I don't think I actually set a password, so I'm just going to do a reset, and I'm just going to call it password. And then I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to say OK. So at this point, we now have our MySQL connected right into the PHP storm, which is extremely handy. In the real world, if we wanted to do this type of connection, we would have a static IP address. We would only be allowing connections from our machine or our static IP address. But in this case, this is good. It's giving us a good opportunity to play around with this. We can do a lot of things at this point. We can create tables, and we can do all the important things we really need to do in this class right from our workstation. So anyways, hopefully this video helped get you connected, and we will move forward in the next video.